Today, what I want to do is explain to you a concept of frame control. So how you can avoid being that needy sales guy when you're going in a high stakes social interaction. In any situation where you have a prospect, when you are selling a product or a service, so there are three main frames. One is the power frame, the other one is the time frame, and the third one is the analyst frame. So these are the frames that you're going to encounter in these high stakes situations. And then you have four frames that you could use to counter these three frames. You can influence the situation by using these frames. You could use the power buster frame, which is when you do small acts of denial and defiance, and this could be done in a playful way. Secondly, you can use the time frame where you're, instead of always be closing ABC, you're using the principle of ABL, always be leaving. And the next one is the price frame where you're really changing your mindset and you consider yourself as the prize because you have a mindset of abundance, that there are so many prospects and you can just plant a seed and then let them come to you because you would do an awesome job if they become a customer and you're the prize. And finally, the intrigue frame, which is the hook, telling some sort of a story that is super interesting but holding the attention of your audience by creating a hook point that you're going to be revealing in the end. What is a frame? So you need to think about a frame as energy field or a lens through which you would interpret the situation. You have your frame and the other person would have their own frame. When these frames collide, then the more powerful frame absorbs the weaker frame. I know this may not be very easy to understand, so what we could do is look at a textbook example. But before that, let's understand the concept of brain. Brain is just 2% of the mass but takes 25% of the energy. We have the croc brain that's responsible for fight, flight, or freeze response. Midbrain helps you in social interactions. And then the neocortex. Neocortex is what you use to actually think logically and analyze situations. So think about you are driving, let's say Texas, and you're going 80 miles per hour, and then there is a cop coming right behind you, and that cop turns on the lights, and your croc brain is going to get activated. Your primal emotions would be at play. The cop is approaching you from that rear view mirror. Well, you roll down the window, and at this moment, you're gonna see that two frames are going to collide. You're gonna come up with some sort of an excuse. Think about what is your frame made of. You're gonna settle on a nice guy frame. I'm usually a good driver, and at that moment, the cop doesn't really have to respond to you or do anything, but the cop is going to have a frame that is nearly invincible because the cop has his frame reinforced morally, socially, politically. I mean, he's got the power. You can just meekly smile as you hand the license and the registration. So because you don't have any higher moral authority to bring to the frame, so your frame is going to be crushed. When you're responding ineffectively to someone else's questions, then you have a weaker frame. You are being frame controlled. That is the concept of frame. So just as a summary, it is the lens through which you look at the situation, and everybody has their frame when they're coming into a social interaction. And then the higher frame is the one that actually crushes the weaker frame. When you're going to a meeting, and then if the audience is not really interested, the way you can handle that situation is that you can have certain small acts of defiance or denial, and you have to do those acts in a playful and a lighthearted way. So let's look at an example. Let's say you're in a meeting and the person that you're pitching to is not really interested. They are doodling on the presentation. What are you going to do at that point? Consider this. What you could do is you could say, hey, Michael, give me that. I see what's going on. Your drawing is pretty damn good. Forget digital transformation. Go ahead and sell me this. No, name a price. This is an extreme example of how high stakes frame situations work in these social interactions. If you deal in creative work and you have to take certain slides or certain creative representatives along with you, you could let the buyer have a sneak peek and then turn it over. Then you could just take it away and say, not right now. Again, you have to do it in a very playful way. So this is not supposed to be mean. This is not supposed to be something that would offend the other person. This is like a quick tease that's followed by a strong denial. And this is massively disruptive to the buyer's croc brain. Now, what you've done in this situation is that you have produced some epinephrine, because attention is extremely important. If you don't have that attention, then the other person's not going to be listening to your presentation, and then forget about being able to communicate your pitch and being able to make that sale. So the key to taking the frame is to perpetrate denial and make it clear. Another example of power frame is, let's say that there is a person who's a big shot, and then you're going into a meeting, and let's say that person comes late to the meeting and says, hey, thanks for coming over. Look, I only have 15 minutes. You could say, that's okay, I only have 12 minutes. But you could do that with a smile. By doing this, you're telling the prospect that, hey, I'm having fun, but I'm also serious. With this simple remark, you have just snatched the power frame away from the target. These kinds of frame games are good for relationships. It can be entertaining for both parties. The better you are at giving and taking frame control, the more successful you'll be. You were not rude or you were not mean when you were defiant and funny at the same time. The prospect is pleasantly challenged by you and instinctively knows that he's in a presence of a pro. Now, don't be afraid to play with your power by engaging a little give and take to keep the attention at the moment, because that is the entire purpose of the game, to capture and keep the attention until your pitch is complete. So we covered the power frame. That's the frame number one. Frame two is the time frame. Let's look at another example for time frame. Let's say the decision maker does not attend the meeting and says, you can go ahead without me. Now, what are your options? Option one, you go ahead with the presentation, or you could say something like this. So guys, you're asking me to delay the start of the presentation? Okay, I can give you, say, 15 minutes to get yourself organized. But if we can't start by then let's just call it a day. If you do this, usually someone in the room would volunteer and track down the CIO, and that person will try as hard as they can to find him and request that he joins the meeting. If someone in that scenario, let's say, says that you can go ahead and start and I'll go ahead and make sure that the CIO gets all this information, no, you don't want to say yes to that. You could say something like, respectfully, I can wait for 15 minutes, but then I have to leave. The first time when you think about something like this, you're gonna be very uncomfortable. In fact, you're gonna be terrified, and you'll wonder if I'm doing the right thing or not. The people in the room will scramble, doing their best to keep you from leaving. Think about it. If you leave, this is gonna be a social disaster for the CIO and the staff as well. Give the CIO promised 15 minutes to arrive and act politely, but true to your frame. If he doesn't show at the point you leave, you don't have to leave the brochure or apologize either. Your time has been wasted. You don't even need to say it. They know. If it seems appropriate, and if it is a company that you want to do business with, you offer to reschedule, acknowledge that these things happen. After all, we've all missed a meeting or two. Next time, they have to come to your office. So this is an important segue into understanding when you have a meeting that's really running long beyond the point of attention, that shows weakness, that shows neediness and desperation. You have to set your own time constraint and bounce out of there. You could say something like this: hey, it looks like time's up. I'm going to wrap this up and get to my next meeting. And if they're interested in you, they'll agree for a follow-up meeting, because you don't want to be continuing to just try to talk faster or force your way through the rest of the pitch. Quickly break it with a stronger prize frame that you can use when you're responding to the time frame. Qualify your target on the spot. You could say something like this: 10 minutes. No, I don't work like that. And maybe we could reschedule. But there is no sense in rescheduling unless we like each other and trust each other. And also, I need to know that you are good to work with. Can you keep the time and appointment? And can you stick to a schedule? Let's go to the next frame. So we talked about the power frame and the time frame. Now the next frame is the analyst frame. In order to understand the analyst frame, you have to think about cold cognition and the hot cognition. These are the cognitions that cannot exist together. Hot cognitions are like feelings of wanting and desire and excitement, and the cold cognition come from the cold processes like analysis and problem solving to maintain the frame control and momentum. The analyst frame focuses on hard facts only. It says that aesthetics or creative features that you have no value whatsoever. It requires that everything must be supported by a number or a statistic. It holds that ideas and human relationships have no value. If that happens to you and someone's getting into the detail, what you need to do is just answer the question directly with the highest level of information, and then you redirect their attention back to your pitch. Let's say it's like a financial deal or you're raising some capital, then you could respond something like this. Look, the revenue is $80 million, the expenses are $62 million, and the net income is $18 million. These and the other facts you can verify later. But now what we need to focus on is whether we are a good fit for each other or not. Should we be doing business together? Where do our circles overlap? Does this make sense to do for both sides? This is what I came here for and to work on. What this tells the audience is that, number one, I'm trying to decide the kind of buyer you are and the kind of buyer that's right for me as a seller. Number two, it tells them that if I decide to work with you, the numbers will back up. Let's not worry about that right now. And number three, I care about who I work with. Keep the target focused on the business relationship instead of getting into the details and being taken over by the analyst frame. So these are the three most common frames that you would encounter. For responding to these, we already covered power buster frame. So let's look at the time frame. In this frame, you have to understand that one of these very thing that's been made popular by the salespeople in the 80s, which is ABC, always be closing. Instead of that, you gotta focus on ABL, which is always be leaving. So here's why it's very important. Number one, we chase that which moves away from us. Number two, we want what we cannot have. And number three, we only place value on things that are difficult to obtain. So don't try to seek that validation. So what you gotta do is at the end of the presentation, you can't be asking like, hey, how did I do? Or would you be willing to sign? Now next, let's focus on the prize frame. So this is like a mindset where you believe that you are the prize. Whenever we chase someone or value someone else more than ourselves, we assume a subordinate position and put ourselves at a serious disadvantage. This can be used in dating as well. Who is the prize? Who is chasing who? That's the important question to focus on. The prize frame is a window through which you look at the world that allows you to see yourself as the prize. If you are trying to win the target's attention, respect, and money, then he becomes the prize. When your prospect is trying to win your attention and respect, then you are the prize. In this, there is a concept that comes which is about the situational status. You can redirect people in domain where you are in charge. Create local star power. There's plenty of evidence that suggests that alpha in the group is trusted and followed without question. There are some examples that already also exist for this. Like researchers have set up many tasks in which men dressed in high status business suits jaywalk across a busy street. When it is really unsafe to cross, the person makes a really hasty judgment using three measurable criteria: your wealth, your power, and your popularity, based on some quick mental shorthand. And the person is going to assign you a social status level, and from that calculation, a frame will be fixed. Next, let's talk about the intrigue frame. The intrigue frame is a way that you can tell a short story, and this story is really important because you're doing some sort of a hook. There are 6 points that you have to have in your story to create that intrigue frame. 1, it must be brief and the subject must be relevant to your pitch. 2, you need to be at the center of the story. Number 3, you should be at a risk or a danger or some sort of an uncertainty. Number 4, there should be some sort of a time pressure, a clock ticking somewhere, and there are ominous consequences if the action is not taken quickly. Number 5, there should be tension. You are trying to do something, but you're being blocked by some force. And number 6, there should be some serious consequences. Failure will not be pretty. So these are the 6 things that you need to have in your story when you're using the intrigue frame. I got a lot of this inspiration from this book, Pitch Anything, from orenklaff, and he's fantastic. He raises like $2 million every single week, and he's got certain strategies, which I think a lot of those strategies are really good, and whether you want to use all of them or just a handful of them, or just be aware of what are those strategies, this is going to be very helpful for you. Let's look at a really good example. So he goes to an investor meeting, and in that meeting the person is really not paying that much attention, and the person just starts eating an apple. So he gets an idea. He gets up and says that, excuse me, I'm just going to get me some water. He goes to the break room, gets water, and also gets a plastic knife, and then when he comes back, he goes straight to the apple and says, may I? And then without waiting for his response, he just picks up that apple and cuts it into 2 pieces. And he said, listen, Bill, I hope this isn't how you do your deals in a real deal. Everyone needs a piece of the apple. I'll show you what my deals look like. And then you could hear the roar of silence in the room. And then he finished the pitch and then said, okay, well, thank you folks. Thank you for your time today. And then he just begins to walk away. And then suddenly the prospect waves at him and says, wait a minute. And then he started hysterically laughing. But this definitely got his attention. If you like this video, then you would surely like the killer conversation hack video that I have uploaded on my channel. In that video, I talk about 12 things that you could do to make anybody really like you. Subscribe to my channel so I can bring more such content for you. Until next time, goodbye.